Hello, hello, everybody. So we are back for a career and spirituality conversation. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie Pone, and I support spiritual seekers having a career experience to reconcile what they do for a living with who they are as a soul. And today, to support me with this mission, I'm interviewing an amazing colleague of mine, Annette Ebbinghaus. Hi, Annette. How are you today?
Hey, Julie, I'm great. And thank you very much for having me on your program. I follow it and you've had some interesting people on. There's some great conversations. So I'm really fortunate that you are interviewing me today. So thank you.
Thank you for spending the time with me. I'm super excited. I like having some insights about your professional, like such very professional life. I can't wait to delve into it. But before, we always doing a 1-2 minute grounding. Little secret, I'm probably doing it because I need it more than anyone else, but we're doing it anyway. So for everyone who's in a position to do so, you can close your eyes. And first, we're just going to press our feet into the ground for a second with that intention to ground ourselves and connect with the earth underneath us. And then let's move our attention, our focus back into the area of our chest and then connect with our heart. So either by placing a hand over the heart, or maybe you can hear your heart. Maybe you can feel your heart. And when you're experiencing that connection with it, let's just imagine, visualize as if our breath is flowing in and out directly through our hearts. And as we're doing this, let's just take a few slow and deep breaths together for about a minute. I'll let you know when we're ready to move on. Beautiful. So on this last deep breath, let's open our eyes, bringing ourselves back, and ta-da! Welcome back. So Annette, thank you so much for being here with us. So for those of you who don't know you yet, you are a resilience, mental fitness, and wellness, well-being expert. And one of my colleagues as well, there's some modalities that we've shared together, and thanks to which we met actually. So, but you're gonna tell us more about all of this. But my first question is more around your spiritual journey. So I'm first very curious about what is your relationship to spirituality?
Well, thank you, Julie, again for having me here. And I love the opening meditation. It's from the Heart Math, which I'm also a Heart Math coach. And I just find it a very spiritual experience. I mean, starting off with that. So for me, spirituality is really, it's a belief, a way of life that kind of puts a higher power in the driver's seat of the car. So, when we realize that we are not really in control, there's something else in control, and that we have the faith to allow this higher power to steer and guide us in the right direction. And it also spirituality for me involves like a level of consciousness that associates our life with everything and everyone around us. So it's that complete connection. And for myself, I mean, I started my spiritual life very early because I was raised as a Catholic, and I followed my faith with my family. And when in the Catholic Church, you get confirmed around the age around 13 or something like that, and you receive the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And part of that is it's represented by the virtues of faith, hope, and charity.
Can you just repeat the three?
Yeah, it was faith, hope, and charity.
Okay.
And hope, when you think about hope, it's optimism. So when you think about resilience, I mean, optimism is a main driver of perseverance, which is a driver of resilience. And faith, that's the spiritual side. You know, have faith that things will work out, faith in yourself, faith in others. It's non-judgment, really. And then the other one is charity. And for charity, what resonates with me on the charity side is being of service. And it's volunteering, but it's also serving others. And that became a really important value for me. And it kind of, it's even how I started off my career, to be honest with you. It was in service in a way.
Okay. Well, since you're mentioning that, let's carrying on. So that's the best segue, since though I have many more questions about the spiritual side, but so career-wise, what has been your trajectory?
Well, actually, so I started my professional life as a civil engineer. And you might say, well, how is that being of service? So I did my civil engineering in Canada, and there we have this tradition. So when you graduate, we have this secret ceremony. And we're not supposed to discuss what the secret ceremony is, so I can't tell you everything about it. And it is a really interesting ceremony, but it has to do with the failure of a steel structure, a steel bridge in Quebec. And from that day forward, every engineer, when you graduate, you get an iron ring that you wear on your pinky finger on your writing hand. And the reason is that when you're drawing or writing or creating, that ring scratches the paper, and it continuously reminds you that you have taken an oath to serve society. Because in this secret ceremony, you take this oath to be of service to society and to never do harm to society. And and for me, you know, it's interesting because that really spoke to me, because service is an important value of mine. So for the 7 years that I was designing bridges and tunnels and stuff like that, I really took it very seriously into heart that I was helping the betterment of society as a whole with the structures that I was building. So that's how I started. But then after that, I did an MBA, and I kind of wanted to get out of engineering. I have a master's of engineering as well. I'm a concrete specialist. But anyway,
Wow.
yeah. Anyway, so after the MBA, though,
sorry, what prompted you? Like, what was the trigger for you to get out of engineering?
I'll be very open. It was the environment.
Okay.
So I was the only woman that graduated in my civil engineering class. And when I started work, I was the only female engineer in my office. And it was a different time, you know, so we didn't have, I would say, diversity and inclusion wasn't a big deal. And there was still a lot of sexism in the office. And I just grew really tired of that. And on construction sites, I was the only woman. And it just got mentally tiring, I would say, and stressful in certain situations. And I realized, like, to preserve myself, I needed to leave the profession, even though the last job that I had was, I wasn't on sites quite so much. And the head of the organization, he pleaded with me to stay, because I actually left to come and work in Switzerland. This was after my MBA. And he said, please don't leave, you know, like, as a woman, you can go so far. Like, and I said, no, you know what? I realized I don't want to be in this environment anymore. This environment isn't spiritually filling me. So I had to leave. And, you know, and I did. But when I left, I was doing my, I had done my MBA. So I left and I came to Switzerland. I'd been married for 8 years already. My husband stayed in Canada. I came to Switzerland on my own. And I started working at IMD in Lausanne, which is one of the leading business schools in Europe. But what was so interesting is I started working on this project in sustainability. And we had 10 multinational companies that were based all across Europe that we were helping them integrate sustainable principles into their management systems. This was in the early 90s. So this was way before there were sustainability courses. You couldn't graduate in sustainability or anything. So we were really
fashionable yet.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, not at all. I think I'm always a little bit ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
So that being the case, though, it was very fulfilling. And the people that I worked with in these companies, they were all engineers.
Oh,
so it helped that I had an engineering background, but was talking about the need to shift and to bring, environmental principles into the accounting practices. I mean, that was completely new. Like, how do you factor in our damage to the environment into the bottom line? So it was really, I loved the work. I loved it. And I actually ended up writing a book with 2 other faculty members on environmental benchmarking. So that was I guess the second book I wrote. My master's thesis was a book too. But so this environmental benchmarking book was really quite interesting. And it was wonderful to do this benchmarking exercise across, it was global, because I went to all these different organizations, Australia, the States, Europe. It was great. It was a really, really good opportunity. And I really felt like I was, again, being of service. Right, bettering humanity, because if the companies could start taking these principles into account, it was going to help us all in the future. So, again, spiritually very fulfilling. And I only left that position because my husband ended up getting transferred to Singapore. So we ended up moving to Singapore. And that was a whole different spiritual experience, because when I landed in Singapore, I kind of had my own small company in consulting. But at the same time, I gave birth to my 2 children, and I was surrounded by different religions. So I did my best to learn a lot about the different faiths. So the Eastern practices and Eastern faiths, which, I didn't have a lot of firsthand experience with before that. So it really opened my mind to a different spiritual path that other people have, right? So it was really something. And that's when I decided also to start studying the body. Then I became a reflexologist and a massage therapist and aromatherapist. And that was a really good experience too, because I've always been a very physical person. I was a competitive athlete for many, many years until I was 28 years old. And, so I was a very physical person. And I wanted to understand the body a little bit more and how to relax the body, because I realized, I needed to find ways to maybe de-stress myself, because I was always a go, 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 go person. And, when you have kids, it's kind of like, you don't want to put that on your kids, it's a little too much. So, so that's kind of, I started to shift when I was in Singapore. And then from there moved to, go ahead.
I was saying it's interesting because, like, that engineering, civil engineering, and like, so you're working with structures and like systems, and then, but in a way, it's like it's body engineering that you're also got interested into. That kind of mental, like, analyst streak to things.
Yes, it's interesting because no one's ever said that before. But you're right, because you are looking at the body as a structure. And our body is fascinating. In some ways, I think, wow, if I was to do it all over again, maybe I'd study medicine.
Oh, wow.
But I wouldn't want to study medicine necessarily in the traditional way, because I'm more into the preventative side. So it's a different approach to the body. And I really work in body mind consciousness, which is different as well. Right? So yes, so studying the body was quite fascinating, and understanding all the different systems within the body, and that they all have to work. And I even related to sustainability, because at that time I started thinking, wow, our body is like our own planet. And we've got a north, we've got a south, we've got an equator. And we have to make sure that every system within the body is in harmony and balance. If you overuse one, that means you deplete another, or another has to do more work. And then you end up in this depletion of energy. And when your energy goes down, then you start, manifesting different disorders or illnesses. So it was very fascinating. And you're right, actually. I never really thought of it that way.
But like, the same way, like earlier before we started the recording, we're saying like, in a way, you're still with coaching and stuff like that, you're still building bridges. But between resilience for like a structure like a bridge and resilience for ourselves and our nervous system, I mean, there is I guess similarities as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. It's very true. Because when you build a concrete structure, there's reinforcing steel in it, and you need to build the structure so that it's flexible. Which I don't know if you've ever walked over London Bridge. I don't know if you've ever been in London and walked over London Bridge.
Or
Well,
maybe I have, but I don't remember. It must have been a long time ago. Yeah.
So it vibrates, but cars cross it too, right? And it moves and undulates a little bit. Mm-hmm. And all structures have that ability in them because they have to take this, what we call, it's an active load when a vehicle drives over it. So it's a ripple effect of the energy that gets transferred into the concrete and into the steel structure, okay? So the structure has to be built to take all that movement, but stay solid, but also flexible enough so that it doesn't break. Right? That's how it works. And our mind has to be flexible enough that when strong winds come, when there's a lot of weight maybe be put on our shoulders, that we can take that load. So it is similar in that way, very much so. And it's interesting. I've never really thought of it that way before, but it very much is, because we have to have that flexibility of nature. But again, in order to have that, you have to have a good solid foundation. And the most important thing when you're building a structure is the foundation. If the foundation's wrong, it's just not going to work. If you think about the foundation in a spiritual context, right? Spiritually in consciousness, I think it does start a bit with understanding or being exposed to religion at a young age. And I know a lot of people don't follow a faith anymore and don't necessarily take their kids through that process. And I work a lot with teenagers and young adults. And what I find is a lot of them, they don't have that foundation. So when they start asking existential questions, they don't know where to go. Instagram is not the answer. Gaming is not the answer. Facebook's not the answer. YouTube stars are not the answer. But that's what they're really exposed to right now. And it's not always good. It's not always good. So having some foundation in a practice of some sort becomes important, because so in meditation, there's all sorts of different forms of meditation and different spiritual practices. But meditation is a form of prayer, and prayer is a form of meditation. So they really go together, because prayer can be like a mantra in a way, and it takes your mind off of the everyday and transports you to somewhere else. Okay. And then there comes intention, usually as part of a prayer as well. Like, what is it that you need? What is it that you're hopeful for? And in meditation, you can meditate on a mantra. You could meditate in the transcendental meditation. There's something that you're really meditating on. I'm a Louise Hay practitioner, so we've done a lot of work with affirmations as well. So you might have that as a mantra. So there's all sorts of different ways to get at the same thing. The chanting, in Buddhism, there's the chanting and the ringing of the bowls, the sound. Again, that is all meant to transport you out of your body in a way, to settle the nervous system into the parasympathetic side versus it being on the sympathetic, the stress side of the nervous system. So all of this is meant to ground and center you. But if you never learn anything like that when you're younger and you hit these teenage years where things are really upside down, it can be a real struggle. And then say you get through those years, but then you get into young adulthood and you get through university and then you start your work and you're doing your job and suddenly you look around and you're like, is this it?
Yeah.
Is this it? And this is where a lot of young people that I've worked with, I always suggest to them that they start volunteering. Because when you are of service, again, the core value of mine, service to others, you feel so good about yourself. There's a definite spiritual aspect of serving other people. And it also creates or activates the empathy circuitry in the mind and the body. And empathy is the way forward to understanding individuals. And when we can be really empathetic with other people and empathetic with ourselves and the life that we've lived, because no one's lived a perfect life, right? It makes us more compassionate. And compassion is the basis of all of the great faiths, all of them. They all have a lot of similarities, no matter what you do. And then, of course, there's all the great, lots of books you can read and spiritual people you can follow. And eventually, a lot of people do get to those things, which is great. I just think our world would be a better place if we got to that a little earlier.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes people until they're in their 40s and 50s, whereas I actually think with younger people now, they're getting there earlier. Things have changed. I mean, COVID really changed things as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's interesting because I wasn't educated, like I didn't grow up in a religious household.
Right.
So my first experience with religion was at 6-year-old in the classroom in elementary school when the teacher left the classroom and another woman came in for an hour of catechism. But I had never heard ever the word God, Jesus, Christ, like never. So it was totally alien to me. And it was such a shock to realize I didn't understand what was happening. Why is the teacher changing? Why are all the other kids, they look like it's perfectly normal and like they know exactly what's going on. And then we had this book about Jesus and everybody seemed to know what it was about but me. And I'm like, so I ended up, well, sort of learning about this weird story, and like, so as if you learn history or French or like whatever, topic in school. And when I reflect, so of course, so with that, I ended up, wanting to do all of the religious things like all the other kids, confirmation and stuff. And so I ended up being baptized, like at 7 or 8 or, and stuff like that. But then when I reflect on this experience now, because after all this, I had a massive turnaround of thinking, no, like, this is all, crap. So I like such an atheist for a very long time after that. But now that I reflect on it, I have this perspective that, it's like before 6, when our subconscious is a sponge. So when you haven't been exposed to religion or faith, like at that age, then it's not part of your makeup. So then it becomes like a belief that you learn with your conscious mind, and it's totally different. So when they say if you want to, they say like religious people, you need to educate them when they're young, that's when it becomes like such a belief that you think it's an absolute truth. But if you miss that stage, then it's completely out. So I'm sorry, it's a long segue into this, but so I've missed that foundation totally. So it took a long time to create it for myself in a different way.
It's interesting. And I mean, I would say that, organized religion today, one of the issues is that they haven't progressed with time.
Mm-hmm.
And there is value in tradition. There really is. And there's value in ritual. I mean, think about it. We tell most of our clients, have a morning ritual, have an evening ritual. That all actually comes from religion way long before you and I. It's interesting. When you trace back the origins of some of the things we do and why we do them, that's where it comes from. It was that they had a practice. So and there's comfort in that. There's comfort in that for the mind and for the body. So you came to it later, but then of course you did your turnaround, which a lot of people do. A lot of people do. And then I would ask you though, so then when you started having existential questions, at least you had an awareness of God, of a higher power, of something that you could call upon to help you. Because I ask people like, so what do you call on when you really need help? Like when you're super desperate, what do you do? Like when you can't call a friend because the burden is so heavy, where do you turn? So it's a question for you. So how did you do? Now we're flipping. I'm now the interviewer. So where did, because you came back to spirituality and consciousness.
I came back to it from a different door, and like through energy, like started with Reiki and which was, but it was hindering in a way because I had gone so much on the opposite side that anything that sounded tiny bit religious, with some of the wording, like I would reject massively. So like it really took a long time, and it's through the experiences of energy and then understanding. And long story short, I think it's the understanding of this, the experience of all of this energy work, etc., which kind of made me more and more acquainted to, okay, there is something else. There is something more than just the body. There is something all-encompassing. There is something else than just the body separate from each other, etc. And then it's actually science that kind of got me, really kind of sealed the deal for me when I started to get interested in physics and how, like, the science of spirituality. Some some people out there are teaching about, energy, and like they explain it from a very scientific point of view, and then it all made sense. And even like, like all of the spiritual side that I had been practicing in a way, but was not so confident to express, because part of me was like, this is, there was still that little tinge of this is woohoo, or this is dogmatic, or whatever. And so when the science came into it, the other part of my brain, the logical part of my brain, went on board, and I'm like, okay, now I'm fine. Now I can start opening up about it. Now it all makes sense.
I will say, like within religion, there is a lot of dogma, and there can be stigma attached to it as well. And it's rising above all of that. It's coming above that. And it's interesting you got it from Reiki, because I'm a Reiki master as well. So I do energy work as well. And I also work on the integrative quantum medicine level, which is really talking to Shen energy. So it's a different energy field around the body as well. I've done shamanic work. I've done all sorts of different things. And part of that, I guess, is I'm very curious. And it's good to experience different spiritual practices. And I'm a mindfulness practitioner as well. So, all that based in Zen and Buddhism. And it's, but I always come back to my original faith, and I mix everything together. Because I can see where they're all related in some way. And it depends on, I guess, who you were listening to, even when if you were in church. It's like, who's doing the homily? Are they really good or not? I happen to have some really great people that bring stuff into everyday life, and it brings it home. So, it always depends on who the messenger is in a way too. Yeah, I think it really does. And even started the St. Ignatian spiritual practices. Oh, they're fantastic. fantastic. And they are really all about the universe and energy. It's very different, but it's still within the Christian faith. You're like, really, this exists. So it's interesting how when you start to look around, you see it, it's kind of, it's there, but you have to look for it. You know, you really have to look for it.
And do you find that as a scientist, someone whose background is in like science, how does science and religion like they, because I know a lot of scientists that are also religious and vice versa. So like both of them are not anti, you know,
Yeah.
like
So I live in Geneva, so I'm close to CERN, and I read a book about CERN. I cannot remember the name of it because it was quite a while ago. And one of the central premises is that we're trying to prove that there's a God.
Mm.
And I'm like, really? So they're trying to create dark matter, but in that they feel that somehow they're going to prove there is a God. I thought that's kind of interesting. Because so science is very rational, but you know, even in science, so remember I was talking about concrete structures, so that they have to be flexible. It was the most challenging thing for me to get my mind around. This was in second year university, and honestly, it was not a good year for me. And I could not wrap my mind around certain things. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't wrap my mind around these things that I could not see, I was not going to pass.
Oh.
And I had to figure this out. Otherwise, I was done and I couldn't continue. Somehow I passed. I don't know how. But over those summer months, something shifted in my brain. And then third year, it's like, oh, this all makes sense. Somehow it started to make sense. So it was like letting go of having to see something to believe it.
Oh,
Weird.
Sounds familiar.
Doesn't it though? So it was like, okay, because I can't really see this. You can see it oscillating on a computer, but am I really seeing this? So it was very interesting. And then, you know, third and fourth year were great, but my mind had to open up.
Yeah.
Because I just couldn't get around it. And it's interesting, when I studied business in the MBA, oh my goodness, when I studied accounting, it drove me crazy. Mm-hmm. Because I'm thinking, wait a minute, what do you mean? You can have LIFO, FIFO, you can do it this way or that way. Is there not an exact way to do this? You know, I'm thinking, what is this with finance? You can put it over here or depreciate it for so many years. It's like, yes, but I paid for it here. And you're telling me I can let it go. This makes no sense to me. I started thinking, this is all like woohoo. Yeah, it's like, this isn't, like I'm mathematically oriented. I'm like, this is not math. This is playing with math. This is like deciding what puzzle I want to create. I found it so discombobulating to my mind. You know, so it's really interesting. I guess in a way I've pushed myself enough that I've had to be very flexible of mind to think in a different way and to try to experience the body in different ways, to experience my mind in different ways. And, you know, it brings me to, I mean, one of the main practices, we went from Singapore and then to the States and then back here to Switzerland. And I started studying something called Sophrology. And one of the reasons was we had, at this point, moved so much. And after having the kids, I was the trailing spouse in a way, remaking myself every time we moved.
Sorry, again, Annette, you said you were the one who?
I was the trailing spouse. So we call, when you move around as an expatriate into foreign countries, and the person who is being moved, you're moving because of their job. So you become, the term is the trailing spouse. And the trailing spouse has to find a job or remake themselves over and over and over again. So, you know, it gets to be a bit challenging, especially if your spouse is traveling a lot, and mine was. So I really realized when we came back here, because I did not want to come back to Europe, that I needed to do something or I was going to have a nervous breakdown. And that's when I started studying sophrology. And it just changed me in a lot of ways, because it's really studying sophrology. It's sophronology. It's the study of consciousness in harmony or in peace. Yeah. And it's absolutely beautiful. And it was based in medicine. So science, right? Yeah. In Western philosophy and medicine. It was a neuropsychiatrist who developed it in Madrid and Switzerland back in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. But he also he spent several years studying yoga. His wife was a yoga master, so they were in India for a long time. And then they were in Japan and they studied with Zen masters. And then he spent time in Tibet with the Dalai Lama and he studied Tibetan Buddhism. And what he did is he took aspects of all of these Eastern religions and practices and he brought them in and mixed it with the Western philosophy and science and created this series of dynamic exercises called Sophrology. And it really brings you toward consciousness. And it just was the right thing for me. I mean, I had tried some other meditation practices before that, but because I'm a bit of a type A person, I like to move. I was a runner, competitive runner for years, and I still run to this day. And I am a cyclist. I do all sorts of things. That spoke to me because there was movement. It's a series of there's breath work, but there's movement, stilling, there's visualization, breath work, affirmations. It kind of brought everything together under one umbrella. And because of the movement aspect, I could actually do it. Before that, there's no way you would have gotten me to do at the age that I was when I learned it. There's no way. I was too busy, too active. So it really, really kind of sang to my heart. And that's sort of I use a lot of sophrology in a lot of my work, especially the work that I do with teenagers and with young people. So.
Actually, it's a great segue because I want everyone to know who you work with and what capacity so that people can relate, if they ever need, if they might need, someone like you. So tell us a bit about how you're working now, with who. And I know that you have maybe a sophrology program coming up, so I want to know about that too.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. So I work with professional parents a lot because I have some things where it's specifically for parents, but it's also professionally oriented. So if you want to do something in the self-development area or resilience.
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna ask a stupid question. When you say professional parents, it's like it's because it sounds like a are there some amateur parents out there as well, or
no. So the programs I work with, so it's for parents, but when I say professional parents, it's parents who are also working, could be working part-time, maybe entrepreneurial parents as well, who are juggling. Juggling a lot of things. And not that a parent that is just a parent is not juggling. They are. I mean, from my experience, and especially if your spouse is traveling a lot, it is a lot. So that type of parent as well. But as well, I don't want to say it's just for parents. It's not. It's for professionals as well. So I do a lot of work in that area with the positive intelligence work. I use the personal resilience indicator as an assessment tool. It's I think it's the best assessment tool out there because it includes lifestyle and health as a driver. Anyway, so there's that. And then I do a lot of work with adolescents, with teenagers in different ways, helping them through their examination periods. I have a specific program for that I run online now, and it's live. It's not like a digital program. It's a live program with myself. And there's an app that I use to back all of that up with them so they practice and everything. And I've been doing that one for years. And it's something I developed myself. It's got sophrology, mindfulness, positive psychology, some NLP, lots of different things, all encompassing. And then there's like a teen program or a life program where it goes a little bit beyond that, where it really helps them get to know themselves, their strengths, helps them with their purpose, and for them to feel really content in their own skin, right? Because that's critical, I think, for teenagers. And then I also do that with young adults. So with university students or people who are just coming out of university and starting work with that group. I run programs with that group as well. So I do a lot of work in this area, but I also still do body work because you can't separate the body from the mind. So a lot of people who live close to me who come for reflexology or massage, we then also we'll do some sophrology work. I've helped a number of people through traumas, some with addictions, working through sort of, I would say, light addictions, not too heavy. So there's a series of things. Because I have experience in a lot of different areas, I can move in different ways depending upon what comes to me.
Okay.
So
what's the let's say if there was a pattern, like, do you see mostly people because it's around stress and physical problems, or like achieving goals, or or could it be a mix of
Yeah, it's
anything?
a mix of those. It can be burnout, people that are close to burnout, or if they maybe have an issue with an addiction of some sort, they realize it's becoming a problem, so then they'll come. Um, and often they'll be working with maybe a therapist as well, and then I'll work alongside that person, but I work in a very different way, right? And then it could be people who have specific goals that they're trying to achieve, and helping them achieve them without burning out. I get that. And sometimes it's like as an expatriate, it's other expatriate people who come because that whole process is challenging. And it's, how do I work through that challenge? How can I be more resilient to work through the life that I'm living? Because it's not, people think it's a great life, and it is, but it's not simple. It's just not
Oh, no, it's
simple.
not. Mhm.
No. And I actually teach sophrology as well at the Sophrology Academy in the UK. It's the only sort of sophrology school that teaches in English. There's an online school that I also work with them, but it's an actual school in Kent. And so I've been teaching there for years. And I teach future sophrologists how to work with adolescents. Sometimes I have something with families. I have a family course as well. And then I train sophrologists or coaches who work with adolescents into my B-Chill exams program. But the thing that I have coming up actually is a fundamentals of sophrology program that's coming up February 4th. And there, it's meant for individuals, but also practitioners that maybe want to learn the practice of sophrology, because they might want to bring it into some of their practices. And it's only the first 2 levels, though. There's 12 levels. And in the foundations year of any sophrology program, you learn the first 4 levels. And it's very transformative just to do those 4 levels. The 12 is completely consciousness training. It's fantastic. But the first 4 levels is what most people go through. A lot never go through the 12. The 12 is a master's program, which I've done it actually twice. So this is the first 2 levels, and it's for people that want to go through this transformation. And the first 2 levels, it's the present and the future.
Mm-hmm.
It's yoga, and then some of the bases are in yoga, and then some of the bases are more in contemplation, some more in the Tibetan Buddhism. It's non-secular, though. It has nothing to do with religion. It really is practices, and you learn the dynamic relaxations and then what we call associated techniques. And it's pretty powerful. And then the next 2 levels, if people wanted to continue, then they would go through the Sophrology Academy and follow their course, because they can then jump into that course. Or as a practitioner, you might say, okay, that's all I need to know. But then you can actually be trained in my B-Chill exams program, because you need to have a basis, these fundamentals of sophrology, in order to teach my program.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
It's interesting because sophrology was actually my first entry door into the spirituality, so to speak, because that was really my first step. I had fallen off a horse. I had like back problems, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, I'm going to do sophrology kind of sessions," and I loved it. And the sophrologist used to do Reiki, so then it opened the door to Reiki for my back, and then I did the Reiki, and then that was the start of things. But then when I moved to Ireland, I realized that no one knew what sophrology. There didn't even seem to be like a word for it. And then I thought about it's only a French speaking, it hasn't moved. So it's great now that I realize that, okay, no, it's
yeah.
it is professional.
A number of English-speaking sophrologists now in the UK, and then because of the online program, there's some now in the US and Australia and South Africa. And yes, it's really starting to expand, and it's kind of like a hidden gem, because it's been around before mindfulness, well before mindfulness. And really, Casado, the neuropsychiatrist who started it, he was working in a hospital with people who had PTSD and psychiatric disorders. And he used this practice, these 12 levels, and he managed to get them off of shock treatment and off of all their medication.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it was unheard of. And then he started, talking about it. But he was a medical doctor, so he didn't patent it. He didn't market it really. It just wasn't who he was, right? And he had studied under Binswanger, which was he's the grandfather of feminology. So this is the phenomenon of feminology. It's a big part of sophrology.
Okay.
And he was kind of the last one under that. And that's why it was in the French speaking part of Switzerland. So that's why it was in French. So it's in France, you'll find sophrologists everywhere, loads of sophrology schools. I know. And there's a bit more in Spain because he then ended up retiring to Andorra, and he passed away a few years ago, but his daughter is still kind of carrying the mantle of Casadian sophrology. So it really is something. And I do think it's gonna keep coming as a wave. It really will. It really is it's used a lot for pain management. It's used a lot in birthing. There's so many different ways to use the sophrology practice. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have reminiscence of like these exercises, like being on the chair, like the sophrologist would get us to kind of have a awareness of ourselves from the top, from the right, the left, underneath ourselves. So and you come out of it with such an interesting.
That's a second level. That's a second level technique. And it's about contemplating yourself as an object. So the subject becomes the object and the object the subject. And we never consider ourselves from that aspect. And it really does, as far as consciousness training go, I think it's one of the best for consciousness training because it's something you do when you're not awake and you're not asleep. And because of the movement, you're not in that complete PNS state. You're in the middle, like we are in heart math.
Yeah.
When we're coherent, you're in the middle. Sophrology is done in the middle. So you're using both sides of the nervous system, but you're using both sides of the brain as well. It's great. It's really great.
So your program, which is online, right?
Yeah.
It's starting on early February. Is that correct?
Yeah, February 4th is the first date, and it's one Sunday a month.
Okay.
And then for 4 months, and then it's one 45-minute session in the evenings each week in between, where we do other practices. Okay. If you can be certified, so you can get you can write an exam at the end if you want.
Okay.
Or you don't have to.
Yeah. So for some people, it's just going to be for curiosity, like self-care, and for other people, it might be the start of yet adding another like modality to their repertoire. Okay.
Exactly.
Sounds great.
Exactly. And I'm running the program in conjunction with the Sophrology Academy. So it's a joint program. Yeah.
So that sounds great. So I'll make sure to have all the, like, maybe if you have the links, I'll have it all kind of included in the communication so people can go and check it out. And I also just want to be conscious of the time. I know you have some stuff to attend as well after us. But before we finish, I just want to ask you, is there something that I haven't asked that you would like to address, or like any last words that you would like the audience to hear?
I think we've addressed everything. What I would say for people, though, is, life is a journey, and curiosity might have killed the cat, but it won't kill you. So be curious and explore life from different angles, from different physical angles. Try something you've never tried before, from different spiritual angles, from different mental angles, like learn something you've not ever thought you could learn before. Our possibilities are endless. And it's realizing that. And at any age, both my parents are in their 80s. My mother paints on feathers, and she still works in an art gallery. She paints all the time. She's got commissions all the time. My father is still making furniture. Wow. Like big furniture. I mean, and he's 85. So, it's that level of involvement in life that is going to create a good life. and a conscious one. You know?
I like that. I like that. Thank you, Annette. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And to anyone who's been listening to us, thank you so much. And Annette, I'll see you soon in a professional meeting. And for the rest of you, I'll see you next week in another career and spirituality conversations.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Love you.